So today I am joined by Nacy Friday. Her seminar, Language Disorders versus Language Differences for ELL, is now offered by BER as an on-demand course. Nacy, thank you for taking the time to meet with me today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to do it.
And before we talk a bit about the course, would you mind just giving a brief introduction about yourself for those who haven't attended one of your workshops?
Sure. I actually started out in life as a graphic designer and came to speech language pathology a little later in my early career. Once I found this as a profession, I've never looked back. It's the best time I ever spent in college. And I've been working now as an SLP for nearly 30 years, and it's very exciting to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I want to get to your course now. So I'm curious, what was your motivation behind creating this seminar?
I work with this population, and I feel that this specific area is so important. Students who are bilingual have such an advantage, but often when they're in special ed, there is always that concern that we want to make sure that they are adequately placed. So I think it's something that as SLPs and actually as educators in general, it's a really important topic.
Absolutely. And would you mind providing just a brief overview of some of the topics covered in this seminar?
Yes, we kind of do a foundational discussion of what are ELs and a discussion of how that's changed over time. The most important part is talking about reducing bias and a format in order to do that, and specific tools that we can use as SLPs to help us adequately support EL students in terms of assessment, but then also if they land on our caseloads, how can we work with them and make sure their specific needs are being met?
Absolutely. And a critical component in this course is also the four-quadrant approach to language assessment. You do a big deep dive on this in the course, but would you mind just providing a really quick, brief overview of what this assessment is all about and sort of the importance of it?
Sure thing. So the four quadrant approach is basically a way of gathering data points and trying to get as many equitable data points as we can get. Too often when we test monolinguals, our focus is on standardized measures. And a huge part of the four quadrant approach is getting away from that and recognizing the importance of all kinds of data points and gathering as many as possible.
Right. And you already sort of touched on this, but one of the things that you discuss is the risk of over-identifying as well as under-identifying students with language disorders. And I'm curious, for SLPs who maybe don't have that experience, just how important is it balancing between that over-identification versus under-identification?
Well, I think it's important to take the perspective of the student and the parents when we're thinking about that. And we want to make sure that we get the support that a student really needs and the targeted support that's appropriate for that student in terms of supporting their growth. So that's kind of from a student perspective. And from a parent perspective, we want to make sure we don't overqualify and have unneeded worry that there's something inherently different about how that child is processing language, and making them worry when they don't need to be worrying. So and then also just that overqualification of putting them in the wrong space in terms of what kind of support they get on a campus.
Great. And I know we've alluded to a few different things here, but your seminar provides such a wealth and variety of strategies and tools that SLPs can use. I'm curious, when you're putting a seminar like this together, how do you decide what sort of tools and strategies to include? And if there's some that you need to cut, like how do you make that process?
That is such a great question. A huge part of it is that I'm a practitioner as well as a presenter. And I also support the SLP group, which is 100 plus SLPs in our district. That's part of my current job. And I'm always thinking, what do I need? How can I hack this scenario? How can I determine what's the biggest priority and make sure I'm including that in my assessment? So whenever I'm looking at tools and tricks, I look at that piece, and then I also try to look at the broad aspect that there are a lot of different campuses with a lot of different populations. And so I try to include some elements that I have never touched on, but I do believe are significant for this population. And that way it can be broader for all SLPs that are across the United States, because that's really what this is all about.
And after completing the course, are there any sort of immediate takeaways that you're hoping SLPs can walk away with?
I think the most important takeaway is you can't forget that parent interview. That's one of the most important elements, is starting off with parents and establishing that collaborative relationship as you assess. That's probably the most important. And second to that is the recognition that standardized scores no longer count if the test does not support that. And so honoring the fact that there are dynamic assessment and other tools that we can use, and gathering as many data points as possible really can make for a much better assessment. And that's really what best practice is all about.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Nacy. I know you're a very busy person, and I just want to thank you so much. I had such a great time working on this course. And you can find Nacy's on-demand course, Language Disorders versus Language Differences for English Language Learners, on the BER website. Thanks, Nacy.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you.